Every once in a while, a film arrives not with thunder, but with a subtle tremor, one that begins beneath the surface and then travels upward until it shakes an entire genre awake. In 2021, that tremor carried the name Nobody, a compact action thriller directed by Ilya Naishuller and anchored by an unexpectedly magnetic performance from Bob Odenkirk. The title itself reads like a taunt, short, unassuming, and self-effacing, almost daring the viewer to underestimate it. And for many audiences, that dare worked. What began as a simple revenge thriller unfurled into a surprisingly calculated commentary on identity, routine, masculinity, and the pressure cooker of modern suburban life. At its surface, Nobody plays inside familiar sandbox territory. Guns, fists, bruises, and bodies falling with quiet choreography. But beneath that ammunition runs an intellectual pulse. Its screenplay by Derek Kolstad, best known for architecting the John Wick universe, injects a film with a curious duality. It frames violence as both a liability and a release. It suggests that the very skills which make a man dangerous can also make him feel alive. Yet the film refuses to moralize too loudly. Its biggest reveal is not the protagonist's past, but rather how deeply that past interferes with his attempt at a normal, economically productive life. The guns are loud, but the subtext whispers. When Nobody premiered in 2021, global cinema was still crawling out from the economic suppression of pandemic lockdowns. Streaming platforms were dominating attention, and traditional theatrical revenue models were being rewritten in real time. This placed the film at a unique industry intersection. Action cinema historically thrives on box office scale, big screens, big sound, big crowds. But Nobody instead succeeded as a hybrid property. It earned a modest theatrical run, approximate $57 million worldwide, while simultaneously leveraging digital sales, PVOD, and home media markets. In doing so, it demonstrated a new commercial path for mid-budget genre films in a post-pandemic distribution ecosystem. Thematically, the film examines a crisis that has become increasingly recognizable in modern psychology: the erosion of self-identity through hyperroutine. Hutch Mansell lives in what economists might label a stable, low-variance lifestyle. Commute, coffee, spreadsheets, bills, trash day. The role is familiar to millions across developed and developing economies. But what distinguishes Hutch is not misery, but numbness. He is not depressed, he is dormant, and like a combustion engine idling for too long. The film lets us feel the buildup of unspent energy. The violence, when it arrives, is not simply entertainment. It is catharsis. What makes Nobody even more compelling is the casting of Bob Odenkirk, known primarily for his comedic and dramatic work in Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. Odenkirk had never been positioned as an action protagonist. That casting choice functions almost like industrial misdirection. Audiences arrive expecting sarcasm and character study, only to be handed a durable, bruised, and methodical action tactician. The transformation was not superficial. Odenkirk trained for years, studied fight choreography, and executed substantial portions of his own stunt work. In a media landscape where authenticity is increasingly tied to brand value, his performance helped elevate the film from genre exercise to industry conversation. Cinema as a medium often thrives on dualities: silent versus loud, subtle versus explosive, intimate versus spectacular. Nobody understands that tension. It builds a soft domestic world around Hutch. Quiet breakfast, unspoken frustrations, the mechanical repetition of suburban survival. This gentleness acts as a framing device, making the bursts of brutality feel almost operatic, not because they're grand, but because they feel like confessions. Every punch is less about defeating an opponent and more about excavating a suppressed version of self. From a cultural standpoint, the film entered a psychological ecosystem where audiences, especially male audiences aged 25-45, were confronting questions about purpose, identity, and agency. The notion of being useful in society, economically, socially, domestically, carries pressure. Hutch Mansell becomes a case study in what happens when usefulness is misallocated. His talents are not only underutilized, they are incompatible with the economic structures around him. Action films, especially post-2010, have increasingly begun embedding these anxieties. John Wick used grief. The Equalizer used justice. Nobody uses boredom. As an artifact, the film is intentionally lean, 92 minutes, minimal exposition, precise dialogue. Instead of expanding lore outward, it compresses narrative inward, letting character psychology shoulder much of the storytelling weight. The film is therefore not merely consumed, it is decoded. It asks the viewer to infer history from posture, scars, and the unspoken hostility between Hutch and his wife. Violence becomes not the climax, but the language through which characters negotiate identity. In that sense, the film becomes an academic point of discussion for those studying action cinema as a communication system rather than a spectacle. Hutch Mansell's life is engineered for invisibility. He wakes up before the sun, pours the same coffee, drives the same route, parks in the same spot, and returns home to the same quiet disappointments. Nobody does not rush this routine. It studies it. The camera lingers on repetition, framing Hutch as a man dissolved into systems. Corporate workflows, suburban schedules, and domestic obligations that function smoothly but without joy. This is not failure in the cinematic sense. It is something worse, stagnation disguised as success. The suburban environment is intentionally bland. Neutral colors dominate the frame. Soft lighting removes contrast, and the spaces feel overly clean yet emotionally vacant. Hutch's house looks lived in but unloved, functional but soulless. His marriage to Becca exists in polite cooperation rather than intimacy, a partnership held together by logistics instead of connection. Their conversations are efficient, trimmed of warmth, reflecting a relationship that has been optimized for survival rather than fulfillment. The film quietly suggests that comfort, when unexamined, can become its own form of confinement. Professionally, Hutch occupies a low-profile role in his father-in-law's manufacturing company. He is competent, invisible, and deliberately underestimated. Meetings occur without his voice being acknowledged. Decisions pass over him. His posture, slightly hunched, eyes lowered, signals a man trained to shrink himself. In a financial sense, Hutch is productive. In a psychological sense, he is depreciating. Nobody treats this erosion seriously, framing it not as melodrama, but as an accepted social contract many men unconsciously sign. The inciting incident arrives with deceptive simplicity, a home invasion. Two intruders enter Hutch's house late at night. The setup screams action movie inevitability, conditioning the audience to expect retaliation. Instead, Hutch hesitates. He refuses to fight back. He allows the burglars to leave. This choice becomes the film's first provocation, not to the criminals, but to Hutch's family and the audience itself. His son looks at him differently. His wife withdraws further. Society interprets restraint as weakness, and nobody understands how quickly perception hardens into judgment. This moment reframes the entire narrative. The home invasion is not about crime. It is about expectation. The film challenges a deeply ingrained cultural script that masculinity must always respond with force. Hutch's inaction is not cowardice, but the audience is not allowed that comfort immediately. The aftermath is far more painful than the threat itself. Shame settles into the household. Respect evaporates. Hutch becomes a ghost in his own home, punished not for violence, but for refusing to perform it. What follows is not immediate revenge, but internal pressure. Hutch's dissatisfaction begins leaking through micro-expressions, clenched jaws, and restless movement. He is not angry at the burglars. He is angry at the life he has accepted. The film carefully delays any reveal of his past, allowing tension to grow without explanation. This restraint is critical. It aligns the viewer emotionally with Hutch's confusion rather than his competence. We do not yet know who he was. We only know who he is not allowed to be anymore. The brilliance of this stage lies in its patience. Nobody understands that escalation is meaningless without context. The early narrative does not chase spectacle. It builds suffocation. Every silent dinner, every ignored suggestion, every look of disappointment compounds the emotional debt Hutch carries. By the time he finally steps outside his routine, it feels less like a choice and more like an inevitability, an overdue reaction to years of psychological compression. In industry terms, this deliberate pacing separates nobody from generic action fare. Rather than front-loading violence to secure audience engagement, the film invests in character equity. It trusts viewers to sit with discomfort, to recognize themselves in the mundane humiliation of being overlooked. This approach broadens a film's appeal beyond adrenaline seekers, positioning it as a character-driven thriller disguised as a revenge story. The setup is not about what will happen. It is about why it must. The narrative pivot occurs with precision. Hutch Mansell, long restrained by routine and societal expectation, finally allows his suppressed identity to surface. Nobody does not rush this transformation. It orchestrates it. What begins as a quiet suburban life slowly gives way to kinetic energy, carefully calibrated to maximize emotional payoff and audience satisfaction. The second half of the film treats each action not as spectacle, but as consequence, turning each fight sequence into both a narrative and psychological investment. Hutch's first major act of violence is surgical, almost clinical. He tracks down one of the home invasion criminals with methodical efficiency. The choreography is grounded. Every punch, kick, and improvised maneuver is weighted with realism. Injuries matter. Exhaustion matters. Unlike blockbuster fare where heroes rarely bleed, nobody makes every impact count. From a financial perspective, the careful design of these sequences allows mid-budget constraints to shine. Practical effects, tight editing, and clever camera angles create a visceral sense of danger without inflating costs unnecessarily. As Hutch escalates, the film expands its scope beyond the personal. We encounter the criminal underworld, corrupt enforcers, and the shadow of Hutch's hidden past. Each new adversary is a test of both his skills and narrative pacing. The plot is engineered like a startup's growth phase. Initial testing in controlled environments, unexpected variables, rapid iteration, and high-stakes decisions. Audiences are invested because each victory is earned and each misstep carries weight. Emotional ROI rises with each scene, reflecting the careful calculation of narrative risk versus reward. The introduction of Yulian Kuznetsov, a formidable antagonist played with icy precision, shifts the film's tension from personal to structural. Hutch's fights are no longer just about revenge. They become a negotiation of identity, power, and respect. The stakes are simultaneously human and systemic. By elevating the conflict, nobody transforms a simple revenge story into a meditation on how a single individual interacts with larger societal and criminal structures. This dual-layered escalation reinforces the film's intellectual appeal while sustaining visceral engagement. Violence in Nobody is not aesthetic. It is language. Each confrontation conveys emotion, intent, and consequence. For example, the famed staircase fight sequence is both a ballet of brutality and a commentary on resourcefulness, stamina, and improvisation under pressure. Hutch leverages the environment, books, furniture, walls, as extensions of a strategy. The film teaches the audience that intelligence, preparation, and situational awareness are as lethal as physical prowess. Cinematically, this merges choreography with storytelling, amplifying both impact and narrative clarity. The stakes are further heightened by familial context. Hutch's wife Becca and children are not passive observers. Their reactions shape his moral calculus. Every move Hutch makes carries potential collateral damage, integrating ethical tension into the action. From a behavioral economics perspective, each choice is a cost-benefit analysis, risk exposure versus protective instinct, personal satisfaction versus household stability. These embedded calculations deepen the audience's emotional investment and enrich the storytelling ROI. The mid-climax sequence, involving an ambush on the Russian mafia, exemplifies narrative compounding. Each plot thread converges, delivering high-intensity action without losing character focus. The camera work, editing, and sound design orchestrate a symphony of tension. Tight cuts amplify urgency, dynamic angles communicate scale, and spatial audio immerses viewers in chaos. This is a textbook example of cinematic engineering, where artistic, technological, and financial choices intersect to maximize impact per frame. Ultimately, the second half functions as a market release of Hutch's emotional product. The audience has been primed. Empathy, suspense, and investment in his domestic and personal life are monetized emotionally. Each action sequence is conversion, translating narrative risk into engagement dividends. The payoff is both kinetic and cathartic. Nobody rewards patience and strategic restraint, illustrating how thoughtful escalation can deliver premium narrative ROI. By the final confrontation, Hutch embodies both the nobody and the exceptional. He is no longer invisible, but fully integrated into a framework that honors skill, intelligence, and consequence. Resolution is not just victory. It is recognition of the cumulative narrative and psychological investment. The story closure reflects a carefully calculated balance. It satisfies audiences, reinforces theme, and maintains consistency with the grounded world established in the first half. Hutch Mansell's journey in Nobody is a compelling study of suppressed potential, latent aggression, and moral calculus under pressure. Psychologically, he embodies a duality: externally compliant, domestically restrained, socially invisible, internally skilled, alert, and capable of decisive action. The film treats this duality not as a gimmick, but as a lens through which we could decode human behavior under constraint. Every hesitation, glance, and carefully measured strike is a window into opportunity cost, the price paid when skills and instincts remain unexpressed. Early in the narrative, Hutch's home life serves as a behavioral baseline. He consistently prioritizes predictability over excitement, routine over risk. Behavioral economics frames this as a conservative allocation of energy and attention. He invests minimal cognitive and physical capital into domains deemed safe but unfulfilling. This decision maximizes short-term household stability while incurring long-term psychological depreciation. Audiences intuitively recognize the tension. Human behavior is rarely rational when emotional suppression accumulates into latent frustration. The home invasion acts as a behavioral trigger, flipping Hutch's cost-benefit matrix. Previously, the utility of an action outweighed the emotional or social risks of retaliation. After the incursion, the scale recalibrates. Hutch's latent abilities gain immediate marginal value, and the opportunity cost of continued dormancy becomes intolerable. Each subsequent violent act is an economically rational choice in his private moral ledger, resources expended to secure personal, familial, and psychological capital. Nobody carefully charts Hutch's risk assessment under stress. He evaluates threats not only in kinetic terms, but also in relational and environmental context. A single misjudgment could compromise family safety, attract law enforcement scrutiny, or escalate adversarial retaliation. The film positions these stakes as multidimensional, highlighting that action is never cost-free. Behavioral economics thus becomes a narrative scaffold. Every decision conveys trade-offs, risk exposure, and the complex interplay of self-interest and obligation. Hutch's identity reconstruction mirrors psychological theory on competence and agency. Suppressed agency often generates latent anger, which, when triggered, leads to disproportionate behavioral expression. The film visualizes this through both physicality and posture. Inaction manifests as slumped shoulders, muted gestures, and downward gaze. Agency manifests through poised strikes, spatial awareness, and deliberate strategy. By externalizing internal psychology, Nobody converts abstract behavioral theory into tangible cinematic expression. Moral risk is a constant companion. Hutch's actions violate social norms, legal statutes, and ethical expectations. Yet the narrative frames these violations in context. They are proportionate responses to extreme stimuli. This creates a layered moral economy where audiences are invited to weigh intentions, consequences, and proportionality. The film educates viewers in the subtle accounting of conscience. What is acceptable collateral, what is overreach, and how suppressed human instincts can be safely and effectively discharged. Trauma response further enriches Hutch's psychological profile. Years of covert skills and combat experience have created adaptive reflexes. Suppression of these instincts have been long-term trauma mitigation, but the sudden stimulus, threat to family, activates deeply ingrained responses. Hutch's behavior aligns with stress response research, fight, flight, or calculated control. His actions favor the fight dimension, but with an intelligence and efficiency born of both rehearsal and lived experience, demonstrating the film's attention to authentic psychological patterns. The domestic lens remains critical. Hutch's wife, Becca, is an anchor of emotional reality, representing both social expectation and moral accountability. Her interactions with Hutch provide feedback loops, influencing his cost-benefit calculations. Each action is therefore not isolated. It exists within a household economy of trust, fear, and love. The film illustrates that human decision-making is relational as well as individual, intertwining economic, psychological, and moral capital. Nobody's screenplay also incorporates audience behavioral economics. By delaying revelation of Hutch's lethal competencies, the film builds anticipation, scarcity, and tension, the narrative equivalent of a premium asset appreciating over time. Each action moment is weighted against audience expectation, creating psychological compounding. Satisfaction grows with cumulative understanding, engagement increases with tension management, and attention is monetized emotionally. Hutch's transformation is simultaneously a lesson in identity economics. Suppressed potential carries hidden value. When unlocked, it can recalibrate personal and relational markets. The film's narrative demonstrates that latent abilities, when strategically applied, yield compounding dividends: physical security, emotional release, social respect, and narrative gratification. Audiences experience this payoff viscerally, learning the subtle mechanics of psychological investment alongside protagonists. In conclusion, nobody uses Hutch Mansell's character as a vehicle for exploring complex intersections of psychology, behavioral economics, and moral philosophy. Each choice, hesitation, and action is a measurable data point in his personal ledger, reflecting opportunity cost, risk assessment, and adaptive strategy. The audience is educated without didacticism, decoding human behavior while simultaneously enjoying kinetic and narrative satisfaction. Hutch becomes both case study and cinematic hero, illustrating the profound cost and reward of suppressed potential. 5. Production budget, marketing, and ROI, the economics of violence. Nobody represents a carefully balanced mid-budget experiment in modern action cinema. The production budget is reported at approximately $16 million, approximate, modest by Hollywood standards, yet the film achieves a visual and kinetic intensity that rivals far costlier franchises. This financial prudence reflects strategic allocation. Resources are concentrated on practical stunts, highly trained performers, and select high-value sequences that maximize audience impact while controlling expenditure. In essence, the producers treated every dollar as a potential return on emotional investment. Casting Bob Odenkirk, traditionally known for his dramatic and comedic roles, was both a creative and financial gamble. The risk was multi-layered. Audiences might reject an action protagonist who did not fit the genre archetype, while investors needed assurance of market viability. Odenkirk's pre-existing brand equity from Better Call Saul partially hedged that risk, providing familiarity and credibility while allowing the film to redefine expectations. This illustrates a principle common in project finance: balancing high-risk innovation with reliable assets to stabilize projected returns. Marketing strategy leaned heavily into digital and social platforms. Universal Pictures and Screen Gems utilized teaser campaigns emphasizing the everyman-turned-lethal narrative. Clips of Odenkirk's first major fight sequences were released selectively, creating scarcity and anticipation, a classic scarcity-driven demand signal. By leveraging demographic targeting, particularly males aged 25 to 45 and action enthusiasts across North America and Europe, the campaign optimized cost per impression, CPI, while minimizing traditional mass media spend. Approximately $8 to $10 million approximate was allocated for marketing, focusing on high ROI channels, social media, influencer endorsements, and pre-release digital previews. The theatrical release strategy was hybrid. Nobody opened in conventional cinemas, while simultaneously capitalizing on PVOD, premium video on demand, platforms, reflecting post-pandemic distribution dynamics. This dual-channel approach allowed revenue diversification. Theatrical gross could drive brand visibility, while PVOD ensured immediate monetization and risk mitigation against unpredictable box office attendance. Worldwide box office performance reached approximately $57 million approximate, yielding a strong 3.5x multiple over production budget before ancillary revenues, a highly favorable ROI metric in mid-budget action cinema. Ancillary revenue streams amplify profitability. Home media sales, streaming licensing, and international distribution rights contributed substantially to EBITDA-style margins. Nobody's performance on Netflix, Amazon Prime, and other digital platforms was reported as robust, particularly in regions with limited theatrical penetration. In aggregate, these revenue channels transformed the film into a multi-platform asset, demonstrating the importance of revenue layering in mid-tier production economics. The film also leveraged merchandising and brand integration thoughtfully. While Nobody is not a franchise-driven blockbuster, selective licensing agreements, such as tactical gear replicas and film-branded apparel, supplemented income. These elements were carefully managed to avoid brand dilution. Economically, each extension of the film's intellectual property functions as a secondary cash flow channel, enhancing net present value without substantial incremental production expenditure. Production allocation reflects a highly disciplined approach to financial efficiency. Practical stunts replace extensive CGI, minimizing post-production cost while maximizing authenticity, a decision aligning artistic vision with fiscal responsibility. Major set pieces, such as a staircase fight, were shot on location, reducing construction overhead and offering long-term value in scene versatility. Camera setups, lighting rigs, and stunt choreography were optimized to capture maximum coverage per shooting hour, reflecting time as capital principles central to studio economics. International distribution was a key revenue lever. By targeting markets where action cinema maintained strong appeal, Eastern Europe, Latin America, and Asia, the studio maximized foreign box office contribution, representing roughly 40% of total revenue, approximate. Distribution deals were negotiated with variable royalty percentages, ensuring flexibility in revenue recognition while mitigating risk from underperforming regions. This approach reflects modern film finance tactics, portfolio diversification, and geographic hedging of revenue streams. Marketing analytics played a pivotal role. Audience testing of trailers and social media snippets informed content editing and promotional emphasis. Clips that highlighted Odenkirk's unassuming appearance contrasted with lethal skill generated higher engagement, validating the film's thematic focus and reinforcing campaign ROI. In effect, data-driven creative decisions improve both emotional and financial conversion rates, ensuring that promotional spend translated directly into ticket and streaming sales. Strategic timing of release also contributed to economic success. Nobody premiered in March 2021, avoiding crowded summer blockbusters while capitalizing on renewed appetite for theatrical experiences post-lockdown. This temporal positioning reduced competitive cannibalization, maximizing the probability of audience capture per marketing dollar spent. Timing, in this sense, functions as a multiplier of both visibility and profitability, reinforcing that film economics is inseparable from calendar strategy. From a pure ROI perspective, Nobody demonstrates the efficacy of intelligent mid-budget filmmaking. Total production and marketing investment, when weighed against box office, streaming, and ancillary revenue, yields a compelling case study. Small, disciplined budgets can generate outsized returns when paired with creative ingenuity, targeted marketing, and multi-channel distribution. This economic model challenges traditional assumptions that only $100 million plus budgets can drive cinematic impact, validating a lean, calculated, audience-centric approach. In summary, Nobody exemplifies a fusion of financial prudence, creative risk-taking, and market-savvy distribution. The producers optimized budget allocation, harnessed talent in a non-traditional role, executed a disciplined marketing strategy, and maximized revenue across theatrical, digital, and ancillary channels. Each dollar invested was mapped to measurable returns in both engagement and profitability, teaching a critical lesson. In contemporary cinema, intelligence, creativity, and economic foresight are inseparable components of success. Nobody demonstrates how mid-budget action cinema can harness technology strategically to amplify impact without inflating costs. The filmmakers deliberately combined practical effects, advanced camera systems, and digital enhancements to craft sequences that feel immediate, tactile, and emotionally resonant. Each technical choice, lens, rig, lighting, editing workflow, functions as a deliberate instrument, translating Hutch-Mansell's psychological tension into visual and kinetic reality for the audience. Camera technology was a foundational pillar of the production. The ARRI Alexa LF, known for its large-format sensor and exquisite dynamic range, was employed to capture both intimate domestic scenes and brutal action sequences. Its sensitivity allowed the filmmakers to maintain cinematic depth even in low-light stairwell fights, preserving texture and atmosphere without requiring costly artificial lighting. Lens choice, including Cooke S4 primes and zooms, offered subtle shifts in focal compression, allowing directors to manipulate spatial perception and emotional focus simultaneously. Lighting design reinforced thematic duality. Domestic interiors relied on soft, diffuse lighting to create a sense of routine and calm, while action sequences employed directional, practical light sources, lamps, windows, streetlights, to highlight motion and spatial orientation. The interplay of shadow and highlight emphasized both physicality and narrative tension. Color temperature shifts were carefully calibrated. Warm tones for family interactions, cold and desaturated palettes for the outside world and violence, enhancing subconscious audience response through cinematic psychology. Practical effects were prioritized over CGI wherever possible. The staircase fight, widely recognized as a standout sequence, utilized rigged furniture, controlled pyrotechnics, and choreography integrated directly with the environment. This created a visceral sense of authenticity, allowing each impact to feel consequential. Strategic camera angles were combined with practical rigging to mask stunt doubles seamlessly, increasing believability while containing production costs. By limiting digital augmentation to minor cleanup and compositing, the filmmakers preserved tactile realism, aligning technology with audience immersion. Editing workflow was critical to translating raw footage into narrative energy. Avid Media Composer was the primary suite, augmented by DaVinci Resolve for color grading precision. Editors exploited both long take continuity and rapid cuts to calibrate rhythm, emphasizing anticipation and payoff. Spatial continuity was preserved, ensuring viewers could track Hutch's physical movement without disorientation, demonstrating the importance of technology as a storytelling instrument rather than merely a visual enhancer. Sound integration involved cutting-edge pipelines. Foley was recorded with high-fidelity microphones to capture environmental texture, metal impacts with thuds, and body collisions. Pro Tools sessions facilitated multi-layered soundscapes, enabling dynamic manipulation of volume, frequency, and spatialization. The auditory design reinforced narrative tension. Silence, amplified breathing, and directional sound cues contributed to a psychological layering of suspense and emotional engagement, highlighting the synergistic relationship between technology and human perception. Visual effects, though limited, were applied strategically to enhance safety and spectacle. Controlled blood effects, minor digital extensions of environments, and composited background plates allowed the filmmakers to maintain realism while protecting performers. The philosophy was clear. Technology exists to support story and performance, not dominate them. This approach contrasts with high-budget franchises that often risk audience detachment through overuse of CGI, proving that calculated technological restraint can amplify return on both artistic and financial investment. Motion analysis and choreography leverage data-driven techniques. Stunt coordinators pre-visualize sequences using digital animatics, integrating actor positioning, camera movement, and environmental interaction. These simulations minimize reshoots, optimize coverage, and informed editing decisions before principal photography began. In a financial sense, each hour of pre-visualization reduced marginal cost per frame, demonstrating how technological foresight contributes directly to production efficiency and ROI. Camera rigs were customized for specific sequences. Handheld setups provided immediacy during domestic confrontations, while Steadicam and cable-assisted cranes enable fluid movement through multi-level environments like the staircase fight. Gimbals and track-mounted cameras enhanced tracking shots without requiring large, expensive dollies. The combination of rig innovation and disciplined cinematography translated practical resources into visually impressive, emotionally effective sequences. Data management on set employed modern workflows. Multi-camera setups generated terabytes of raw footage per day, necessitating real-time color-graded previews and centralized storage. Digital dailies allowed the director and editors to review and adjust performances immediately, reducing post-production ambiguity and reshoot risk. The integration of hardware, software, and human workflow reflects a systems approach. Technology and process converge to ensure both creative fidelity and financial efficiency. Finally, music scoring technology augmented storytelling. Score recording utilized digital orchestration combined with live elements, integrating seamlessly with the film's sound design. DAWs and MIDI programming enabled adaptive scoring, emphasizing narrative beats with precision. Technology here amplifies emotional currency. Audience tension is managed almost algorithmically, aligning the subconscious with Hutch's journey from invisibility to action. In total, nobody demonstrates that technological innovation does not require blockbuster budgets to achieve cinematic sophistication. The film strategically integrates camera systems, lighting design, editing pipelines, practical effects, and sound engineering to maximize emotional impact, efficiency, and audience engagement. Each decision reflects a careful cost-benefit analysis, aligning artistry, audience psychology, and fiscal discipline, illustrating that innovation in mid-tier action cinema is both technical and financial intelligence in motion. Behind the kinetic energy of Nobody lies meticulous production management, a finely tuned orchestration of time, talent, and capital. The film's success is as much a triumph of logistics as of creativity. Every set, every stunt, every camera movement was scheduled with precision, reflecting the principle that in cinema, time equals money and efficiency amplifies both artistic and financial return. Scheduling was a critical tool. Filming locations included suburban homes, office interiors, and urban exteriors, each with unique constraints. Production planners sequenced shots to minimize travel, lighting resets, and actor downtime. For instance, all stairwell fight sequences were filmed consecutively, allowing stunt coordinators, actors, and camera crews to operate at peak efficiency. By batching high-intensity sequences, the production maximized return on human capital while reducing marginal costs associated with setup and rehearsal. Workforce allocation followed hierarchical clarity. Directors, cinematographers, stunt coordinators, and production designers operate within clearly defined chains of responsibility. Decision-making authority was delegated strategically, allowing small teams to operate autonomously on practical stunts, camera rigging, or lighting adjustments. This decentralized management mirrors principles of corporate project governance. Bottlenecks are minimized, accountability is clear, and time-sensitive decisions are empowered at the operational level. Leadership dynamics were also essential. Ilya Naishuller, the director, acted as both creative and operational conductor, balancing narrative vision with production reality. Daily briefings and shot breakdowns ensured alignment across departments. The approach treated each day of production as a discrete financial unit, with output measured not only in footage captured, but also in adherence to budget, time, and safety metrics. This illustrates how creative leadership functions as both artistic and economic stewardship. On-set logistics integrated human factors and material resources. Stunt choreography required synchronization of multiple actors, environmental props, and camera operators. Safety protocols were enforced meticulously, as one accident could delay production and inflate costs exponentially. Equipment rentals, lighting rigs, and grip trucks were scheduled in tandem with shooting windows, ensuring capital-intensive assets were utilized at maximum efficiency. Production management in Nobody demonstrates the financial intelligence of cinema. Every resource is both creative and monetary. Budget management remained intertwined with operational decisions. Stunts and practical effects, while visually intensive, were carefully priced against potential ROI. For example, the staircase fight sequence, while labor and time intensive, was justified by its narrative payoff, audience engagement, and subsequent marketing utility. Production managers calculated these trade-offs with financial mindset akin to project portfolio optimization, ensuring that each high-cost sequence delivered proportional artistic and economic return. Studio economics also influenced production choices. Screen Gems, the distributing studio, imposed mid-budget constraints to mitigate investment risk. This required disciplined allocation across departments: casting, location, stunts, and post-production. By maintaining tight cost control, the studio preserved upside potential in box office and streaming revenue, exemplifying how governance and financial oversight coexist with creative decision-making in contemporary film production. The interplay of human talent and technology was a continuous optimization problem. Camera teams, lighting crews, and editors had to coordinate with stunt performers and actors in real time. Daily shooting schedules incorporated buffers for rehearsals, safety adjustments, and contingency scenarios, minimizing unplanned downtime. This approach mirrors operational efficiency in corporate project management. Redundancy is minimized, workflow bottlenecks are identified early, and time savings translate directly into budgetary preservation. International collaboration added complexity. Some sequences involve location, scouting abroad, and coordination with local production crews. Logistical management encompassed permits, equipment transport, and labor compliance, demonstrating that studio economics extend beyond the domestic market. Nobody leveraged these collaborations to maintain cost effectiveness while achieving high production value, illustrating the global dimension of studio operations in mid-tier cinema. Communication infrastructure was optimized for speed and clarity. Daily call sheets, shot lists, and pre-visualizations ensured that each department knew its objectives and dependencies. Digital tools allowed instant sharing of dailies, storyboards, and editing notes. These communication systems reduced errors, minimized misalignment, and accelerated decision-making, underscoring that operational transparency is as valuable as talent or budget in realizing cinematic goals. Time management was directly linked to financial impact. Each shooting day carried tangible costs: crew salaries, equipment rentals, insurance premiums, and location fees. By orchestrating sequences efficiently, nobody minimized extraneous days, converting potential cost overrun into operational efficiency. This aligns with the principle that in studio economics, accelerated production without compromising quality is one of the highest leverage tools for ROI maximization. In conclusion, nobody demonstrates that cinematic excellence is inseparable from disciplined production management and studio economics. Leadership, hierarchical clarity, scheduling, workforce allocation, and logistical orchestration transform modest budgets into high-impact sequences. The film exemplifies how creative vision, operational discipline, and financial prudence converge to produce both compelling storytelling and measurable economic success. While Nobody is a contemporary action thriller rather than a historical epic, attention to realism and authenticity remains a cornerstone of its narrative design. The film situates its story in a recognizable suburban and urban environment, grounding Hutch Mansell's extraordinary abilities in everyday life. This deliberate realism functions as a cognitive anchor, allowing audiences to suspend disbelief while engaging with high-intensity action. Scientific accuracy, particularly in physics and human biomechanics, underpins the credibility of each sequence, creating a subtle educational layer beneath entertainment. Action choreography was meticulously designed with anatomical and biomechanical principles in mind. Stunt coordinators consulted with martial arts experts and physical trainers to ensure that Hutch's movements, from strikes to falls, conformed to the human body's natural limitations. Punches and kicks were calibrated for impact realism, not exaggerated arcs. The famous staircase fight sequence demonstrates an understanding of gravitational force, momentum, and energy transfer, subtly educating the audience about spatial physics in high-pressure scenarios. Each frame communicates consequence, reinforcing the idea that in real life, bodies have limits and actions have cost. Firearm handling was another domain of rigorous scientific adherence. On-screen weapon usage adhered to operational safety protocols and realistic mechanics. Loading, aiming, and firing sequences respected recoil, magazine capacity, and trigger discipline, aligning with professional training standards. This attention to detail not only enhances believability, but educates viewers subconsciously on proper firearm dynamics. In doing so, the film merges entertainment with experiential learning, grounding tension in reality rather than stylized fantasy. Environmental accuracy further supports immersion. Locations, props, and set dressing reflected real suburban and urban contexts, from domestic interiors to corporate and public spaces. Production designers incorporated everyday textures, where patterns and functional layouts, creating an authentic environment for narrative and action. This level of detail ensures that audience cognitive engagement is uninterrupted. Viewers intuitively recognize the plausibility of each scene, deepening emotional and psychological investment. Medical and injury realism was incorporated carefully. Stunt injuries, simulated blood, and the depiction of physical exhaustion were designed to align with human physiological response. Characters exhibit fatigue, strain, and visible stress, consistent with high-intensity exertion. By avoiding exaggeration and maintaining proportionality in injury depiction, the film honors human biology, subtly reinforcing educational content on endurance, recovery, and trauma response. This attention to scientific accuracy enhances narrative credibility and audience empathy. Vehicular physics were also observed. Chase sequences, collisions, and evasive maneuvers adhered to realistic handling, breaking distances and momentum constraints. CGI and practical effects were combined to maintain visual excitement without violating physical plausibility. These considerations reflect a principle central to mid-budget action films. Realism enhances immersion, and scientifically consistent sequences elevate audience trust in the narrative world. Timing and spatial consistency were carefully managed. Stunt coordinators and cinematographers ensured continuity across shots, preserving spatial logic and the causal relationship between cause and effect. Each movement, impact, and fall is consistent with prior frames, maintaining believability and aligning with basic principles of physics. By doing so, nobody reinforces that narrative integrity and scientific grounding are not mutually exclusive but complementary. Behavioral realism extends to social interactions and decision-making. Hutch's responses to threats, both immediate and calculated, align with stress response psychology. The film portrays naturalistic hesitation, threat assessment, and adaptive strategy, avoiding cartoonish, superhuman decision-making. This attention to human behavior, informed by psychological research, serves as a subtle educational component, providing insights into problem-solving, situational awareness, and risk calculation under pressure. Temporal accuracy is maintained to enhance narrative credibility. Action sequences, though heightened for cinematic effect, respect the duration and consequences of each encounter. Recovery periods, pauses, and strategic retreats reflect realistic pacing, emphasizing that sustained physical performance is constrained by human endurance. This temporal realism ensures audience empathy and preserves the narrative's intellectual and emotional integrity. Technology integration aligns with plausible use rather than fantasy. Surveillance systems, digital communications, and tracking devices operate within real-world capabilities. Characters interact with technology logically, reinforcing the film's grounded universe. The film educates viewers implicitly on tactical decision-making and technology usage, without resorting to implausible plot devices, maintaining both dramatic tension and cognitive authenticity. While Nobody is not a period or historical film, the commitment to scientific, anatomical, and social realism elevates it above many conventional action thrillers. By integrating biomechanical accuracy, firearm mechanics, environmental fidelity, behavioral plausibility, and technological realism, the film establishes a believable foundation that supports its more extraordinary narrative developments. Audience immersion is maximized because the extraordinary emerges from the ordinary, making Hutch's transformation both credible and instructive. In summary, Nobody exemplifies the integration of scientific and behavioral accuracy into cinematic storytelling. By aligning human physiology, environmental realism, technology, and social behavior with narrative design, the filmmakers create a world that feels tangible, consequential, and cognitively satisfying. The film educates as it entertains, demonstrating that accuracy is not merely a technical detail, but a strategic component of audience engagement, emotional investment, and overall cinematic success. Nobody's visual storytelling is a masterclass in the fusion of cinematography and emotional engineering. Every shot is carefully constructed to translate Hutch Mansell's psychological tension, physicality, and narrative progression into a measurable visual experience. The film demonstrates that cinematography is not merely aesthetic. It is a deliberate vehicle for emotional investment, audience guidance, and narrative clarity, marrying optics, geometry, and visual psychology. Camera systems were selected to optimize both image fidelity and storytelling flexibility. The ARRI Alexa LF large format camera captured high-resolution frames with expansive dynamic range, allowing subtle facial expressions and minute physical movements to register authentically. Prime lenses provided shallow depth of field for intimate domestic moments, emphasizing character over environment, while wider lenses captured high-energy sequences with spatial clarity, guiding the audience's perception of movement, threat, and consequence. Lighting design functioned as a psychological instrument. Warm, diffuse light characterized domestic interiors, reinforcing comfort, routine, and emotional suppression. Contrastingly, harsh, directional, and low-key lighting defined action sequences, particularly in stairwells, parking garages, and urban exteriors. Shadows were engineered to amplify tension, while highlights emphasized kinetic energy and the immediate stakes of combat. The interplay of light and dark acted as a visual metaphor for Hutch's dual identity, invisible civilian versus lethal operative. Color science played a pivotal role in narrative signaling. Cinematographer Benjamin Loeb applied a desaturated palette for urban sequences, emphasizing realism and consequence, while family scenes were imbued with warmer tones to signify emotional grounding. Subtle color grading shifts guided audience emotions subliminally, preparing viewers for tension escalation or resolution. This approach exemplifies how digital post-production and color engineering function as psychological amplifiers in cinematic design. Composition and framing were meticulously calculated to encode narrative information. Rule of third positioning, leading lines, and geometric symmetry were employed to focus attention, convey spatial relationships, and suggest psychological tension. In combat sequences, framing emphasized leverage, trajectory, and physical proximity, allowing viewers to anticipate movement and feel the physical stakes of each altercation. Visual engineering here becomes an almost mathematical orchestration of perception and anticipation. Motion and camera dynamics were integral to storytelling. Handheld setups offered immediacy and intimacy during domestic or suspenseful sequences, creating a sensation of being in Hutch's personal space. Steadicam and cable-assisted rigs enabled smooth tracking through multi-level environments, such as the iconic staircase fight. Subtle shift in camera velocity mirrored narrative pacing, enhancing audience empathy and tension perception. Each choice exemplifies a feedback loop between kinetic energy, human perception, and narrative design. Visual effects were applied judiciously to maintain realism while augmenting spectacle. CGI was limited to environmental extensions, safety compositing, and minor corrections. This restraint preserved tactile authenticity, ensuring that practical stunts and physical performance were foreground. By integrating practical footage with subtle digital engineering, the film maximizes both believability and cinematic impact, demonstrating that technology should serve narrative and perceptual objectives, not dominate them. Depth of field and focus pulls were leveraged as narrative instruments. Selective focus guided viewer attention to critical story elements or character reactions, subtly manipulating emotional emphasis. During the stairwell fight, shifts in focus delineated foreground and background action, allowing audiences to follow multiple layers of kinetic activity without confusion. This precision engineering ensures cognitive clarity while maintaining the film's visceral tension. Lens distortion and perspective manipulation were employed strategically. Slight wide-angle distortion in close-quarters fights amplified perceived motion and threat, while longer focal lengths in domestic spaces compress depth to create intimacy and focus. The cinematography exploits optical physics to manipulate spatial awareness, translating technical decisions into emotional resonance. Each visual adjustment was economically efficient, maximizing narrative impact per shooting setup. Camera placement and angles were optimized for continuity and spatial coherence. Multi-camera coverage allowed for dynamic editing without disorienting the viewer, preserving trajectory integrity during high-intensity sequences. The interplay of angles, low, high, over the shoulder, created a cinematic vocabulary for threat, power, and vulnerability. These visual cues serve as a silent narrative language, communicating both plot and character psychology. Shot composition also incorporated visual storytelling motifs. Repetition of architectural lines, staircases, and confined spaces mirror Hutch's internal struggle between suppression and action. The physical environment becomes a narrative amplifier, allowing audience cognition to map character emotion onto spatial geometry. In doing so, cinematography transcends decoration to become structural storytelling. In conclusion, Nobody exemplifies how visual engineering elevates narrative engagement. Through precise camera choice, lighting design, color grading, framing, and movement, the filmmakers translate psychological tension into visual metrics that audiences intuitively understand. Each technical decision, rooted in optics, geometry, and perceptual psychology, enhances immersion, turning human behavior, risk, and consequence into an aesthetic and cognitive experience. The film teaches a fundamental lesson. Cinematography is as much about engineering perception as it is about capturing images. Nobody demonstrates that sound in modern action cinema is not merely accompaniment, but a structural element of storytelling, guiding audience perception, emotional response, and narrative engagement. Every punch, footstep, and ambient noise was treated as an investment in immersion, where the acoustic architecture amplifies the physical and psychological stakes of Hutch Mansell's transformation from invisible suburbanite to lethal operative. Foley work formed the backbone of the film's sound realism. Footsteps on various surfaces, wood, concrete, metal, were recorded with high-fidelity microphones and layered meticulously. The staircase fight sequence exemplifies this principle. Each impact, stumble, and collision was captured with distinct tonal qualities to communicate mass, momentum, and consequence. The auditory fidelity allows viewers to subconsciously register physicality, enhancing believability and visceral engagement. Environmental sound design was equally critical. Urban exteriors, suburban interiors, and confined stairwells were sonically sculpted to convey space, atmosphere, and threat. Background layers included distant traffic, creaking floors, subtle mechanical hums, and ambient city noise. These elements were engineered to reinforce narrative realism, creating spatial context while heightening tension, illustrating that sound engineering functions as a cognitive mapping tool for audiences. Diegetic sound was prioritized to maintain immersion. Gunfire, impacts, and environmental interactions were recorded or designed to match the physical source, minimizing dissonance between what is seen and heard. When Hutch manipulates objects or engages in hand-to-hand combat, the audience experiences corresponding auditory cues that reinforce spatial orientation and kinetic plausibility. This fidelity supports both narrative clarity and emotional investment. Non-diegetic sound, primarily music, was integrated strategically to manage pacing and audience emotion. The score, composed by David Buckley, utilized orchestral and percussive elements that accentuated tension, rhythm, and emotional stakes. Music cues were synchronized with action beats, guiding subconscious perception of anticipation, threat, and payoff. The score functions as a psychological lever, translating narrative beats into emotional resonance, demonstrating that sound is both an art and a behavioral investment. Dynamic range and spatial audio were carefully engineered. Surround sound mixing allowed directional cues to enhance audience situational awareness, while volume modulation highlighted narrative focus. Silence was used deliberately, particularly in moments preceding conflict, amplifying expectation and psychological tension. These design choices reflect an understanding of acoustic psychology. Controlled auditory stimuli influence perception, emotion, and engagement at a measurable level. Dialogue capture and mixing were optimized for clarity, without sacrificing environmental context. On-set boom and lavalier recordings were supplemented by ADR where necessary, balancing intelligibility with spatial authenticity. Dialogue levels were carefully integrated into the overall mix to ensure that character intention, emotion, and narrative information remained primary, while blending seamlessly with Foley, ambient, and musical layers. This illustrates the dual role of sound, functional communication, and emotional reinforcement. Sound layering was methodical, with multiple tracks combining to create complex acoustic textures. Subtle auditory elements, metal scraping, glass cracking, clothing rustle, were strategically positioned within the mix to heighten realism and tension. This multi-layer design allows the audience to perceive depth, direction, and consequence, effectively translating physical and narrative energy into a measurable emotional response. Music production leveraged both analog and digital techniques. Orchestral elements were recorded live, while digital instruments and MIDI programming provided flexibility in timing and layering. DAWs such as Pro Tools facilitated adaptive scoring, enabling composer to synchronize music precisely with editing beats and on-screen action. The result is an integrated soundscape where every note, percussion strike, and rhythmic pulse serves narrative intent, reinforcing story arcs and emotional payoffs. Acoustic design extended to low-frequency elements, including sub-bass impacts that convey weight in action sequences. These inaudible but felt frequencies amplify physical realism, allowing the audience to sense the force of blows and environmental hazards. Integrating these elements required careful calibration to avoid listener fatigue, demonstrating that technical precision in sound production has both physiological and psychological implications. Post-production sound engineering was collaborative and iterative. Sound editors, mixers, and composers worked in parallel with the director and editors to refine timing, layering, and emotional cues. Dailies and reference mixes were continuously evaluated to ensure that auditory elements reinforced narrative clarity, suspense, and thematic resonance. Technology and human expertise coalesced, creating a workflow that optimized both creative quality and operational efficiency. In conclusion, nobody exemplifies how sound design and music production function as both artistic and cognitive infrastructure. The careful integration of Foley, ambient sound, dialogue, scoring, spatial audio, and dynamic range transforms auditory stimuli into narrative currency. Each sonic element contributes to immersion, tension, and emotional investment, demonstrating that the acoustic architecture of film is a critical lever in translating choreography, psychology, and storytelling into audience experience and cinematic ROI. Nobody's journey from production to audience was supported by a strategic marketing and analytics framework designed to optimize both visibility and financial performance. The film demonstrates that mid-budget action cinema can leverage data-driven insights, demographic targeting, and creative promotional content to amplify impact without the need for blockbuster-level spend. Marketing, in this context, becomes an extension of narrative design, aligning audience expectation with the emotional and kinetic energy of the film. The trailer campaign exemplified precision targeting. Early teasers highlighted Hutch Mansell's dual identity, ordinary suburbanite and lethal operative, balancing domestic relatability with kinetic spectacle. Split A/B testing across digital platforms measured engagement, click-through rates, and watch-through duration. Analytics guided which sequences were emphasized, ensuring that marketing content communicated narrative tension, humor, and action in proportion to audience preference, effectively optimizing emotional ROI before the film's release. Social media campaigns were tailored to audience segments with precision. Platforms like Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok received curated clips emphasizing action choreography, character relatability, and humorous beats. Influencer partnerships amplified reach among enthusiasts of action cinema, martial arts, and thriller genres. Metrics such as impressions, engagement rate, and sentiment analysis informed iterative content adjustments, ensuring campaign resources were allocated to maximize both visibility and conversion efficiency. Demographic segmentation was central to strategy. Analytics revealed that primary audiences were adults aged 25 to 45, skewed toward those with interest in realistic, high-energy action and character-driven narratives. Secondary audiences included younger viewers attracted to stylistic action sequences and viral set pieces. Marketing collateral, including posters, digital ads, and behind-the-scenes content, was designed to resonate specifically with these demographics, aligning creative messaging with predicted audience receptivity and maximizing marketing ROI. Brand partnerships and cross-promotions added layered financial and engagement value. Selected collaborations with automotive, technology, and lifestyle brands provided co-marketing opportunities that enhanced both awareness and experiential immersion. Branded content was integrated organically, showcasing vehicles, gadgets, and props without disrupting narrative integrity. These strategic alliances increased the marketing footprint while offsetting costs, exemplifying efficient revenue augmentation through cross-industry collaboration. Release strategy was informed by both competition and audience behavior. Screening schedules prioritize weekends and select international territories with demonstrated appetite for mid-budget action, while early digital promotion built anticipation. Box office projections, derived from historical performance data and genre-specific trends, guided the timing and scope of ad spend. This strategic orchestration demonstrates how analytical insights inform operational and financial decisions, minimizing risk while maximizing exposure. Audience feedback loops were utilized to refine messaging. Pre-release screenings and online survey data were analyzed to measure emotional engagement, humor reception, and action clarity. Adjustments to trailers, promotional copy, and key visuals were implemented in real time. By treating the audience as active stakeholders in campaign development, the marketing team optimized emotional connection and ensured messaging fidelity to narrative themes. Content marketing included behind-the-scenes features, director interviews, and stunt breakdowns. These assets not only increased awareness, but also positioned Nobody as an intelligent, carefully crafted action film, appealing to cinephiles and casual viewers alike. By blending entertainment with insight, marketing content function both as promotion and educational touchpoint, enhancing cultural capital and brand equity for the studio. Paid media strategies integrated programmatic advertising, retargeting, and CPM optimization. Data-driven bidding ensured budget efficiency while maximizing impressions among high-value audience segments. Geo-targeting and contextual relevance further enhanced the precision of exposure, demonstrating that financial discipline and creative strategy can coexist in a marketing ecosystem designed to amplify both reach and impact. Performance metrics were continuously monitored. Engagement rates, social sentiment, ticket pre-sales, and trailer view-through data provided actionable insights, allowing for agile optimization. Real-time analytics enable marketers to reallocate resources dynamically, ensuring that high-performing channels and creative assets were maximized, while underperforming elements were adjusted or phased out. This approach mirrors financial portfolio management principles applied to creative content distribution. Streaming and post-theatrical release strategies were also data-informed. Predictive analytics estimated digital consumption patterns, informing licensing negotiations, windowing strategies, and international distribution. By leveraging audience behavior models, the studio maximized cumulative revenue potential across multiple platforms, illustrating that marketing analytics extends beyond theatrical engagement to long-term profitability and brand positioning. In conclusion, Nobody's marketing strategy demonstrates the integration of creativity, analytics, and financial intelligence. By combining targeted content, influencer engagement, demographic insight, brand partnerships, and real-time feedback loops, the campaign optimized both audience reach and economic return. The film exemplifies how mid-budget cinema can achieve market penetration, cultural resonance, and measurable ROI through strategic audience engineering, showing that marketing is as much an art of psychology as it is a science of capital allocation. Nobody's reception underscores the interplay between critical evaluation, audience engagement, and long-term brand equity. Critics praise the film for its inventive action sequences, dark humor, and grounded portrayal of a reluctant hero, highlighting Bob Odenkirk's performance as a masterclass in subtle physicality and emotional nuance. The dialogue between critics' opinions and audience response reflects the dual currency of cultural and financial valuation, where acclaim enhances both perception and profitability. Aggregate review platforms, including Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic, provide quantifiable indicators of critical reception. Nobody achieved favorable ratings, approximate 80% positive, from professional critics, with particular emphasis on stunt choreography, pacing, and tonal balance. These metrics not only guided potential viewers, but also informed downstream marketing efforts, streaming negotiations, and ancillary revenue planning. Critical approval serves as a multiplier for both audience trust and investment confidence. Audience reception mirrored critical sentiment, with high engagement on social media platforms and positive word-of-mouth amplifying box office performance. Viewer reviews emphasize relatability, suspense, and humor, highlighting Hutch's evolution from invisible suburbanite to capable action protagonist. This dual endorsement, professional critique and audience advocacy, creates a feedback loop that strengthens cultural capital and extends the life cycle of the film beyond initial theatrical revenue. Awards recognition, though limited, contributed to the film's legacy positioning. Action choreography, stunt coordination, and sound design were highlighted in guild and industry acknowledgments, emphasizing the film's technical excellence. Even without major Academy Awards recognition, these accolades function as markers of quality, enhancing syndication potential, home media sales, and streaming licensing value. Awards operate as both symbolic and economic assets, elevating perceived brand value in multiple markets. Streaming and digital platform reception further expanded the film's legacy. Nobody's post-theatrical release on subscription services allowed it to reach a global audience efficiently, leveraging analytics to identify high-engagement regions. Performance on these platforms, viewer completion rates, repeat viewership, and social sharing provided additional data points validating audience investment and predicting long-term revenue potential. In modern cinema, legacy is inseparable from platform performance and sustained digital engagement. The film's cult appeal emerged through its emphasis on underdog heroism, inventive fight choreography, and subversion of conventional suburban narratives. Fans and content creators amplified key sequences through social media clips, discussion threads, and reaction videos. This grassroots engagement translates into cultural resonance, influencing merchandise opportunities, licensing deals, and franchise potential. Audience-driven content extends both cultural and economic value, demonstrating that legacy is co-created between studio and consumer. Financially, Nobody's performance exemplifies the synergy of critical acclaim and audience engagement. With a production budget of approximately $16 million, the film grossed over $57 million worldwide, demonstrating a multiple of more than 3.5x on production investment before factoring in post-theatrical streaming and merchandising. Critical reception played a key role in signaling quality, reducing perceived risk for viewers, and enhancing box office conversion. The intersection of acclaim and revenue reinforces the concept of cinema as both artistic expression and capital vehicle. The film's long-term valuation also considers syndication, streaming rights, and international licensing. Positive reception enhances resale potential across global markets, while action-driven narratives maintain relevance across cultural boundaries. Analysts can project lifetime revenue based on audience sentiment, genre durability, and critical legacy, illustrating that initial reception is a predictor of multi-platform profitability. In this sense, Nobody demonstrates that legacy is both cultural and financial. Influence in the action genre is a key component of legacy. Nobody reinvigorated interest in grounded, relatable protagonists with realistic stakes, inspiring subsequent productions to balance physical authenticity with character-driven storytelling. Critical discourse often highlighted the film's blend of humor and brutality, encouraging filmmakers to explore tonal hybridity. Legacy, therefore, extends beyond financial returns into shaping industry trends and creative paradigms, creating intangible value for the cinematic ecosystem. Merchandising and ancillary revenue benefited from critical and audience endorsement. Collectibles, promotional tie-ins, and home media editions leverage the film's action sequences and recognizable iconography. Strong reception enhanced consumer confidence, supporting sustained demand and long-term revenue. In this way, cultural capital directly informs economic opportunity, illustrating the symbiotic relationship between reception, recognition, and financial outcomes. Educational and analytical communities have also integrated Nobody into studies of action filmmaking, stunt choreography, and modern narrative architecture. Film schools and online courses cite the staircase sequence, narrative pacing, and visual storytelling as exemplars of efficient mid-budget action cinema. This academic adoption extends a film's influence into intellectual capital, adding a layer of educational legacy that outlasts commercial release cycles. In conclusion, Nobody's critical reception, awards acknowledgement, audience engagement, and long-term platform performance converge to create a comprehensive legacy framework. By earning both cultural and economic capital, the film demonstrates that mid-budget action cinema can achieve sustainable impact, influencing industry trends, audience expectations, and financial models simultaneously. The film embodies a blueprint for balancing quality, profitability, and cultural resonance in contemporary storytelling. As we reach the culmination of Nobody's cinematic exploration, it becomes evident that the film is more than an action thriller. It is a study in the harmonious integration of art, technology, and capital. From the meticulously engineered fight sequences to the psychologically resonant character arc of Hutch Mansell, the film demonstrates how creativity, innovation, and financial strategy converge to produce a compelling cinematic experience. Each element, from narrative design to sound engineering, is a calculated investment in emotional and economic return. The narrative itself is a masterclass in risk and reward. Hutch's transformation, grounded in realistic behavioral psychology, illustrates the film's commitment to character authenticity. Every choice, hesitation, and escalation is orchestrated to maximize audience empathy, ensuring that the stakes resonate beyond mere spectacle. In this sense, storytelling functions as a form of capital, where character development, pacing, and tension deliver measurable ROI in viewer engagement and satisfaction. Technological application underpins every visual and auditory decision. Cinematography, lighting, color grading, and sound design were optimized using cutting-edge equipment and software, such as the ARRI Alexa LF, DaVinci Resolve, and Pro Tools. These tools were not employed for ostentation but to enhance emotional clarity, narrative precision, and immersive experience. In doing so, the film exemplifies how technology can amplify artistic intent, translating human perception and cognition into measurable cinematic impact. Production management and budgeting demonstrate that mid-level financing can yield high creative dividends. With an approximate production budget of $16 million, the film leveraged strategic allocation of resources, optimizing location choices, stunt coordination, and practical effects. Marketing campaigns and audience analytics ensured that each dollar spent contributed proportionally to awareness, engagement, and revenue generation. The economic model behind Nobody illustrates that financial prudence and creative ambition are not mutually exclusive, but mutually reinforcing. Audience psychology was a guiding principle throughout. The film balances anticipation, humor, and catharsis to maintain sustained engagement. Predictable action tropes were subverted to surprise viewers while maintaining plausibility, heightening emotional investment, and creating memorable sequences. This approach reflects a synthesis of behavioral economics and narrative design, where the opportunity cost of attention is carefully considered and maximized. Critical reception and platform performance validate this holistic integration. Favorable reviews, social media engagement, and streaming success collectively contribute to the film's enduring legacy. Each layer of reception, critical, commercial, and cultural, represent a form of capital, reinforcing the notion that artistic excellence, technological sophistication, and strategic financial planning operate in a symbiotic ecosystem. Educational and industry impact further reinforce the film's long-term value. Cinematography techniques, fight choreography, and sound design are frequently cited in professional and academic analyses, extending the influence of Nobody beyond box office revenue. The film functions as a learning tool for students, filmmakers, and content creators, demonstrating the interplay between creative intent, technical execution, and market strategy. Legacy, in this sense, is measured not only in dollars, but in knowledge transfer and industry innovation. Technology and finance converge to enhance artistic vision. Visual engineering choices, practical and digital effects, and data-driven marketing campaigns exemplify the deliberate deployment of capital to serve creativity. Investments in quality production equipment, skilled personnel, and post-production workflows ensure that every dollar generated maximum emotional and narrative value, demonstrating that efficiency and artistry are not opposing forces, but complementary pathways to excellence. Nobody's story, technical sophistication, and economic strategy exemplify the modern action film as a multidimensional enterprise. From Hutch Mansell's relatable transformation to the tactile realism of fight sequences, the film communicates that cinema is an ecosystem where psychology, optics, acoustics, and fiscal prudence operate in tandem. Audience engagement is not incidental but engineered, balancing risk, reward, and satisfaction to produce both cultural and financial ROI. In synthesizing narrative, technology, and capital, Nobody offers a template for mid-budget action cinema. Creative ingenuity married to rigorous technical execution and intelligent financial planning. The film proves that emotional resonance and fiscal responsibility can coexist, delivering an experience that is thrilling, believable, and economically sustainable. Every frame, sound, and marketing decision is calibrated to optimize both impact and profitability, reinforcing the principle that great cinema is a carefully engineered investment. Ultimately, Nobody teaches that film is a system where artistry, technology, and economic insight converge. The filmmakers leverage narrative structure, visual and auditory precision, and strategic marketing to craft a world that feels tangible, consequential, and memorable. Emotional engagement, audience retention, and financial return are interdependent variables, each amplified by thoughtful design and intelligent execution. The holistic success of Nobody exemplifies cinema as both an artistic and economic enterprise. If you found this deep dive meaningful, my literature-loving friends, consider liking and subscribing so we can keep decoding the business and beauty of cinema together.